All right, let's jump right into it. In this briefing, we're going to break down the biggest stories shaping our world right now, from simmering global tensions to some major economic moves. Ready? Let's get started. So the date is September 2nd, 2025. Today, we're diving into the key developments you absolutely need to know. We're talking high-stakes geopolitics, economic showdowns, regional crises, the whole shebang. Let's get you up to speed. Okay, here's how we're going to tackle this. First up, global security. Then, we'll shift gears to the economic battlegrounds. After that, we'll zoom in on some regional flashpoints. And to wrap it all up, we'll connect the dots and see what it all really means. All right, let's dive into our first section, global security on edge. And honestly, the world feels like it's on high alert right now, with all these new tensions and alliances really starting to shift. First up, things between India and Pakistan have gotten, well, incredibly tense. It all kicked off with a devastating terrorist attack back in April. India responded with a military operation of its own. But now, the game has changed a bit. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, has stepped in and officially condemned that initial attack. And that, right there, ramps up the international pressure big time. And this is where you see that classic diplomatic balancing act. Pakistan's foreign minister is saying, hey, we're ready to talk. You've got to think that international pressure has something to do with that. But listen closely to the words, we will not beg for talks. That is not just a throwaway line. That is all about projecting strength and, saving face back home. At the same time, over in China, something really significant is happening. Kim Jong-un just showed up at a massive military parade. This is a huge deal. It's his first major multinational event. And believe me, this is so much more than a photo op. It's a very deliberate play to shatter North Korea's isolation, lock in support from China and Russia, and really to show the world that this anti-US bloc is solidifying. And look, this global friction, it's not just playing out with parades and press conferences. Check this out. The plane carrying the EU's top official, Ursula von der Leyen, had its GPS jammed while flying over Bulgaria. Now, thankfully, everyone landed safe and sound, but the finger is pointing squarely at Russia. This is a whole different kind of aggression. So what do we call this? Well, it's a perfect example of what's known as hybrid warfare. It's all about blurring that line between war and peace. You're using things like cyber attacks, disinformation, or in this case, electronic interference to mess with your adversary. GPS jamming lets you cause chaos and intimidate someone without ever firing a shot. So no, this wasn't some random technical glitch. It was a weapon being used, plain and simple. Okay, let's pivot to our second big theme for the day. Because this global chess match, it's not just about military moves. It's being fought just as hard, if not harder, in the world of economics and technology. And to kick things off, we've got a real bombshell of a claim. Former U.S. President Donald Trump just posted on his social media platform saying that India has offered to cut its tariffs on U.S. products down to, well, nothing. If that's true, it would be a massive breakthrough in trade. Okay, but hold on. This is where we have to pump the brakes and separate the social media post from the actual reality on the ground. As of right now, there's been absolutely zero official confirmation from India. In fact, what we do know is that India has some pretty firm red lines in these trade talks and has even slapped counter tariffs on the U.S. It just goes to show you how much tension is still bubbling under the surface. And that brings us to something that, on the surface, seems like a total contradiction, right? India is all about self-reliance, and its relationship with China is, let's just say, complicated. So why on earth would a giant Indian company, Ashok Leyland, sign a massive deal with a Chinese company for batteries? Well, the answer comes down to one word: pragmatism. It's a purely practical move. This deal gives Ashok Leyland immediate access to top-tier battery tech. And here's the kicker. They're going to localize the manufacturing, making the batteries in India. It's a really smart play to bridge the technology gap while their own industry gets up to speed. Basically, they're securing a vital piece of the electric vehicle puzzle. And speaking of made in India, here is a fantastic success story. Maruti Suzuki is now shipping its electric e-Vitara to Europe. We're talking 12 different countries. That is a massive vote of confidence. It proves that Indian manufacturing is absolutely ready for the world stage and can meet some of the toughest standards out there. All right, time to zoom in a bit for our third section. We're looking at some key regional flashpoints. These are stories that are having a huge and very immediate impact on the ground. And we start with some absolutely tragic news out of Afghanistan. A massive earthquake has hit, and the death toll is already over 800 people. It's just a heartbreaking and brutal reminder of how vulnerable that region is. And you might be wondering, why there? Well, this wasn't just a random event. Geologically, Afghanistan is in an incredibly precarious spot. It's literally where three giant tectonic plates, the Indian, Eurasian, and Arabian plates, are crashing into each other. That constant pressure means earthquakes are sadly a constant and very real danger. So, from a natural disaster, we turn to a man-made dispute that's heating up again. It's about this little island, Kachathevu, that India gave to Sri Lanka way back in 1974. The debate over it has just been reignited in India. And what happens next? The Sri Lankan president makes a surprise visit to the island. Let me tell you, this was not a vacation. It was a very clear, very powerful signal intended to say, this is ours. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. For our final section, let's pull the camera back and try to connect these dots. We've talked diplomacy, trade, even earthquakes. So, what's the big picture? What does all of this tell us about where the world is headed? It seems like four big themes are really jumping out today. First, there's no doubt we're seeing this China and Russia aligned bloc getting stronger and more visible. Second, that big power competition is forcing some interesting moves, which brings us to how economic common sense, like that Ashok Leyland deal, can often win out over political speeches. Third, these long-standing regional disputes, they're always just simmering, ready to boil over. And finally, circling back to the beginning, that line between war and peace is getting fuzzier and fuzzier, thanks to things like hybrid warfare. And all of that leaves us with one final, and pretty heavy, question to chew on. As the world keeps dividing up into these competing teams, these different blocs, is the whole idea of everyone coming together for some real global cooperation, is that just becoming a fantasy? Something to think about.